If you're feeling slightly mad scientist-y,
this video is for you.
Right, so what are we doing?
All right, so we're going to talk about flavor adjustments, particularly for a fermented beverage. In this case, our tester subject happens to be a mead, and further testing, it was a test subject initially. So we didn't focus on the recipe, we were just simply doing a test.
Just made a very simple fruit mead, okay?
So we have a less than optimized flavor profile in this particular mead.
As in it's 9.8%, so call it like 10%, and it's 0.993 final gravity. It is very dry. Like,
it smells lovely.
You get dehydration just from drinking this. That's how dry this is. It does smell great.
But tasting it, we have a cornucopia of issues. So, as you can tell, I have taken notes because I've tried to express this idea multiple times to Brian, and he's just like, what are we talking about?
I never grasped the concept of this video, so I'm gonna turn it over to her, and I'll just add when I feel the need to do so.
So what we're focusing on is the different flavor elements of pretty much any brew, any beverage. And I'm trying to correct myself from saying brew because I know some of you are triggered by that, and I apologize.
Well, the name of our channel is City Steading Brews.
Right. So I typically just say brew for a beverage, but I'm going to try to say beverage for beverage because beverage is a lovely word. All right. So the first thing...
She also says utensils.
I do.
Just so you know.
The first thing in any beverage is the base notes. And that's basically what you put in it to create it in the first place. I'm not going to knock them over, but Brian he's very nervous. Have you ever knocked anything over on camera?
Not on camera.
You see?
Because I move them.
Smack you. So our base notes in this particular are the fruit that we use to ferment it with.
It should be fruit and honey, though.
It should be fruit and honey.
No honey.
The honey is pretty much gone, and that's because we fermented it all out. Now, that is beyond the scope of this particular video because we're just trying to talk about the flavors.
Speaking of flavors, can I talk about what this tastes like?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, let me take another sip. Okay. It's watery. Horrible mouthfeel. Just not good. It's like drinking a glass of water with some very dry, fruity flavors. Okay. Now, I know it's fruit, but it doesn't taste like the fruit it's meant to be. This was a triple berry, if I remember correctly. It doesn't taste like berries. Berries have a natural tartness, and they need that. They're like kind of acidic. Without sweetness, they don't taste like themselves because you have to have a little bit of sugar there. But it all fermented out because, again, went to 0.993. So we have a very watery beverage, so the mouthfeel isn't very nice. And it just washes away super fast, and you're left with like very little flavor. And what is there doesn't taste quite right because it's so dry.
So there's a lot of things wrong with this, obviously, as Brian just told us, but we have many ways of correcting those specific topics. So the first thing we're going to address is the sweetness. Brian and I both typically enjoy a sweeter beverage to a drier beverage. And because this beverage is so lacking in the flavor department and the mouthfeel and pretty much everything, the dryness really isn't working at all. So we're going to add sweetness to this because simply adding sweetness could enhance the flavors that are there, just kind of hidden due to their lack of other things.
Because salty and sweet are flavor enhancers, so they will bring up. They'll like turn up the volume on the flavors that are already there.
Right. Now, this initially was a mead, so one of our options, obviously, is to add more honey. So that's what Brian is going to do in the glass to my left.
If I can get the lid off.
Far left.
Hey, it popped open. Awesome. Glass to your far left.
Your side.
This one? My side? Your side? My side? Your side? Let's do like a healthy spoon. I have a feeling this is going to need it. I have tried mulling this. I have tried sweetening this. I've had problems making this taste good. It's just, this particular recipe is not, I'm not a fan.
So if you were back at sweetening, which is basically what we're doing right now, but you were doing it prior to bottling, which ideally that's what this video is for, to help you get that final perfect flavor profile for your bottled brew, you would need to pasteurize it after adding a fermentable sugar such as honey.
Yes.
So that glass over there, if that was a full gallon or whatever you were brewing but prior to bottling, you would want to go ahead and pasteurize that after you had your final additions of sweetness, because any yeast that were still in there, as long as you haven't gone past their alcohol tolerance, could very well likely re-ferment and cause problems for you further down the road, such as a bottle bomb. So in this glass over here...
Don't we want to taste this first? Wait. Sorry, this is your show. I should shut up.
Sure, we'll taste that first. I am getting a little bit more of the fruit now.
Yes, drastically improved.
I'm definitely getting the flavor of the honey, which was missing in a mead. You want to have some flavor note, even if it's dry. Did I say that right? Some honey flavor notes, or did I just say some?
I don't know. You said some flavor note.
Honey. You want it to taste like honey.
Yeah. But you know what? It was an improvement, but it needs more.
It needs more.
And this is the idea, is you put some and then taste and then put some more if you think it needs it. And I probably just overdid it now. There's advantages to being the one that pours the honey. Now, someone will always ask, how much do you put in? How do you know how much to put in? We don't. We don't do it that way. We do it to taste. And if you've ever watched any of our videos where we do back sweeten, we literally back sweeten to taste. We'll give you a final reading at the end. I'm not going to do that today because I don't even have enough for a sample here. But we would normally give a reading at the end, so that way you have a target gravity to go to rather than an actual volume, because volumes can vary. You know, like you might have a honey that's a little bit lower gravity than ours or a little bit higher gravity than ours, or you might have a few more ounces of liquid or a few less ounces of liquid. That all can make a big difference. So that's why I like to go to gravity readings instead of actual volume.
Personal taste comes into play greatly as well. Our sweetness desired level could vastly differ from yours.
Right.
So you want to focus on who is going to be the final recipient of this beverage. What is their sweetness level that they prefer, and try to mimic that in your beverage.
I don't know if I mix it all. I'm going to try. Now it tastes good. It's very sweet now, but sometimes you have to go that far to get it to work. In other words, when we put some honey in, it improved it. It was better. But now it's rich, it's viscous, it's sweet. The berry flavors are really popping. Honestly, now I like this. I did not like this at all before. Now, the funny thing is, adding that honey actually improved the mouthfeel of it too.
Yeah.
So sometimes sweetness can do a lot of things.
Right. And that's particularly inherent, at least in our experience, when you add honey to a brew, because honey naturally has a viscosity to it that even if you just get the flavor of honey, your mind tricks yourself and says, nope, you're getting that viscosity in your sensation as well.
But now this tastes like a mead made with berries rather than just a very dry berry-like water.
But let's say you weren't making a mead, or let's say you just want to bump the sweetness, but you don't want to add the additional honey flavors. Well, that's when you're going to go to a neutral sweetener, which could just be simply white sugar. If you use white sugar, again, that's a fermentable sugar, and so you will have to pasteurize. Another neutral sweetener that is non-fermentable is allulose. So that's what we're going to add to this glass to see the difference of just enhancing the sugar levels, the sweetness levels, rather than adding the addition of the honey flavors.
Yeah, that looks about right. I had a lot of honey, so
yeah,
it needed it. And, you know, that's the other side. There's no issue, or there's like really no right or wrong as far as how far to sweeten or how far to dry. If you like something super dry, have it super dry. You like something super sweet, have it super sweet. There's really no right or wrong. I've seen some people be like, oh, that's just gross to have it that sweet. Well, maybe for you, but I find that every brew is different. There's some that I liked them at like a 1.002 or 1.000. And then there's others that it had to be 1.030 before I even liked it. This is probably higher than that. But that's what it takes to get it to taste good. Now, could we have made this recipe completely different and probably had a better outcome? Yes, absolutely. But as we said, this was part of a test where the major thing that we were testing was when the fruit was added. You might remember that video.
Yeah, this particular beverage is just here
Just
to
very
illustrate
simple.
the points that we're trying to make
It's
about
just
the
a
different
bare
things.
bones mead. It wasn't meant to taste great. It was just meant to show aspects. I still think it would need more. I think the honey drastically improved it, where the allulose, in this case, it made it sweeter, but it didn't really bring forth much of the fruit flavor.
Right.
It definitely did not improve the mouthfeel at all.
Yep.
This
Yep.
is still watery. So you'd have to add a lot more to get it there.
So that brings me to the next thing that Brian keeps talking about, and that's mouthfeel. The way to get mouthfeel into a brew, if you don't want to add a bunch of honey, or if whatever you did to adjust the other flavors didn't bring out the mouthfeel you're looking for, is to add tannins. Now, there's multiple ways that you can add tannins to a brew.
Before we get into that, can we talk about mouthfeel for a second?
Sure.
What is mouthfeel? People have asked, and I think that's a valid question. It's the difference between if you took water and put sugar in it, mix that up, it's going to taste like sugar water, right? But it's still going to be very watery, very thin. If you take water and you add honey to it and mix it up, now it has a viscosity. That is one way to add mouthfeel. That's just one way to add it, making it feel more thick. Now, but if you look, these are both still very much liquids. They're equal that way, but in your mouth, they feel vastly, vastly different. I mean, I can tell you that right now. The one with honey, it coats your mouth as it goes around. This one just goes, it's gone. It's like, and it's just it's out of there already. The flavors don't linger. Whereas something that has a better mouthfeel, it lingers around so you can enjoy it more. Tannins, take it away.
Add mouthfeel. Now, there's other things that add mouthfeel as
But it's a
well,
different kind of mouthfeel.
as you can see by the illustration with the honey, and we're not going to get into those too much in depth in this particular video. We're going to focus on the tannins as adding mouthfeel. And so some of the ways that we add a tannic element to our brews is through adding black tea or wine tannin, which is
Or oaking.
basically crushed up
Chestnuts.
Oaking also adds tannins because it's inherent in the wood itself, and as it leaches out into the brew, it can add tannins, but that is a longer time period for you to get that tannin into your brew, plus it's going to add other elements as well.
One thing to understand with tannins is that they're a different kind of mouthfeel than, say, what you get from honey. Honey adds a richness and it coats your mouth, whereas the way tannins work is they kind of give like a pucker. Like if you've ever drank a straight black tea or unsweetened iced tea, that kind of dry, sandpapery feel in your mouth, that pucker, that also makes it feel richer and thicker. Combined with the sweetness, now you've really got a depth and a complexity in the mouthfeel that lets the flavor stick around longer.
There's also other elements that create mouthfeel, such as a creamy mouthfeel, and those are other things that I'm not really going to get into in this video. We're just focusing on the tannins to create a mouthfeel for that. The next thing is acids, and you'll find frequently, particularly when dealing with fruit, if it's low on acid, then that's not really going to read as well as a nice punchy fruit note. So you want to add some acid to it. Basically, that can be in the form of lemon juice, or there's
actually different acids that you can add, acid blends that you can add.
Yeah. The ones that are going to adjust the pH, because acids adjust pH, you want to make sure that you either add those after fermentation is complete, so that way it won't affect the fermentation, or you keep the pH within the level that is appropriate for the yeast that you're using.
Right. I remembered what I wanted to say. Sometimes some fruits, like if you use whole fruit, the skins and seeds and stems and things like that, will add some tannic effect as well.
Yep.
So you want to balance that. If you are using a whole fruit, like grapes, for instance, if you use the skins and seeds, they have a pretty strong amount of tannin in them. So you might not need to add as much wine tannin or tea or aging on oak if needed.
Yes. So the next thing we're going to talk about is additives. And these are things that can be added to complement the flavors that you already have, but you don't want to introduce them until after fermentation is complete, particularly if it's something that you're not used to working with. So Brian, as you probably know, really loves spices in his particular beverages. So after fermentation is complete, you can go to town with spices. You just want to make sure that some spices like clove in particular, you want to be a little light-handed on because they can take over your brew rather quickly. One of the easiest ways to stay on top of that is to add a minimum amount of spice and then take regular samples along the way. Right. So that way you know when to remove that spice when you've got enough spice into your brew.
There's a couple schools of thought when it comes to adding spices, and this is all pertaining to adding it in conditioning. You can also add it in primary, but you're taking a little bit of a risk. I know I do it all the time. It's my preferred way, but I know I'm taking a risk. Let me explain. If you add spices in conditioning, there's two schools of thought. One is add a lot of spices and let them extract for a very short period of time. The other one is add a very small amount of spice and let them extract longer. Now, here is my interpretation of those two things. It's kind of like coffee and tea. If you over extract coffee and tea, they both start to taste bitter and off. So I kind of lean somewhere in the middle of those two. I like to add, I don't want to have so little in there that it has to extract for weeks on end. I want to only have it extract for a few days if possible. So I'm going to add a little bit more, not a lot more. Like if I was going to put cinnamon, a whole cinnamon stick is probably good. Clove, like 2, 3 at most. This isn't a gallon, by the way. Allspice, maybe like 10 berries or 12 berries, and let those go for a week. Because if I put in less and let them extract longer, I might get like weird bitterness from them, which they do add a tannic property and they do alter the acidity level somewhat. So everything kind of plays off each other. But my point is, be careful how much you're adding. If you put in like 3 cinnamon sticks, you better check that almost hourly because it's going to extract so fast. You do not want to over extract that and get A, bitterness, and B, overpowered spices. There's nothing worse than too much clove because once you have it, you can't get rid of it. All you can do is try to sweeten the heck out of it and hope it tastes good, but it's probably still not going to be exactly the way it doesn't age out either.
And so this is leading us towards things that you will use to change flavors that take more time to extract. So spices are right on that cusp because it will take at least a week for them to give you the flavors that you want and could take much longer. So we're going to go from there to oaking. And this is when you're going to add wood to your brew and let it sit on that for an extended period of time so that way it can extract the elements of the wood that you want to add to your brew.
And that is a series of videos unto itself. So that's about all we're really going to talk about when it comes to wood aging.
Right. Like Brian said earlier, wood will add a tannic aspect, but it also adds a lot of other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So we talk about this.
It depends on the wood, too.
We talk about this briefly in the brews that we have included oaking or wood aging in.
You said brews.
I said brews. Beverages. I'm so sorry. But like we said, we can do a whole video on
that's
that.
A whole series.
And we actually have done a very abbreviated version.
We could do more.
And I will link that in the description below. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is dried fruit. Now we have added dried fruit in conditioning in many of our beverages because we have found that even if we use a whole fruit in primary, using that same fruit again in dried form in conditioning just enhances and creates a deeper, richer flavor for the end product. And that's something that you may want to consider adding to your beverage.
Right. Well, it's like apple and cooked apple. Let's take that as an example. We brew with the fresh apple, right? So you have that crisp, sweet green apple or red apple flavor that's, it's got a little bit of the malic acid bite and all that kind of thing. But then when you cook those apples down, they just become sweeter and they have kind of a caramelized, and yes, I say caramelized, they have a caramelized flavor and it's a little smoky. So when you combine those two things together, now you have like this amazing apple flavor. We did that in our spiced apple wine, and oh wow, it was incredible. The condensed apple one was amazing too. Anytime we can do that with the dried mixed with the fresh, it's an amazing thing to do.
Yep. So the final thing that I'm going to talk about today in this video, because we're trying to keep this abbreviated,
Believe it or not, we're trying to make this a shorter video.
It's a bit of a wild card, and that is age. We even made a t-shirt because this is so important. Time heals all brews. And what that really means to say...
almost. This one, I don't care how long it's sat, was never going to be great.
What it really should say is time changes all brews.
That's fair.
Because you don't really know ahead of time unless you have a TARDIS, and if you do, please become my best friend because I really could use one.
It would be helpful.
You really don't know what's going to happen until you wait that time to pass. Sure. So most of the times what happens is that any rough edges, any really sharp notes kind of mellow out, kind of blend, and start to play nicely with the other notes that are inherent into your brew. Occasionally, we'll have something that was kind of hidden come forward and be heightened. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Other times, it'll just kind of go, meh, and this one just kind of went, meh.
This particular brew, I don't remember how old it is. Let me see. Do we have it? Hold on. It's from August. So it's like 9 months old.
Yeah, we kind of neglected this one.
No, it's 5 months old.
Personally, I think this one got oxidized, but that's neither here nor there.
Nope, it did not. From drinking it, I can tell you that it didn't. It's just so watery and so bland and so boring. And here's the thing. I said that I sweetened it and I never got it right. I added sugars to it. I never added honey to it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The second we added honey, I was like, oh, it woke it right up. And that's the funny thing about certain things. If it had a strong honey character, we don't want to add more honey and make it just honey and no berry. This had all berry, no honey. So adding honey woke up the berries, added that honey character, and you saw I drank the whole glass, haven't touched that one.
Okay, to summarize, you have your base notes, you have your sweetness, whether it's a dry preference, a semi-sweet, or a sweetness preference. You have acids, you have tannins, you have aging, you have oaking, you have spices, and you have dried fruit additions. There is so much more you can do, but even though this was simply an illustration of those different things, this shows you that if you are uncertain of what your particular beverage needs, you can simply pour yourself a glass and experiment before adding it to your full beverage.
So would you say you have a veritable cornucopia of options?
I would.
For increasing...
A plethora, if you will.
A plethora. You know, that means a lot.
I know.
It really does. So, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.